You got me now? Okay. Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for this day. Lord, we pray that you will just put a hedge of protection around all of us as we enter into what seems to be a pretty difficult time. Not just here, but almost everywhere in the world. We just pray that you will help us to be people of grace and but people that will stand firm in what appears to be an increasingly evil day. Bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm calling this event Horizon. I think I've kind of reached the end of clever titles. Because I had a couple and I ran it by Brian and he goes, "You've already used those before." Which my reaction was, well, yeah, I used them before because they were really good. But this week we're going to talk about some events. It is, as we talk each week, we talk about a period of time that we live in that seems to be all these things that are discussed in Bible prophecy are quickly converging and becoming more and more prominent. It is a world disruptive. I think that we could also say that it is a world getting more disrupted by the day. I do have some concerns. I'll discuss those this week about what we do, and a reminder that you can go to rtntv.org and get the app, or Remnant Truth Network and get the app, and we post these updates there in addition to the Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel. So I use this verse each week. I think I'm probably wearing it out. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Also, we know that we're entering into a time, the Bible tells us that these end times are going to be perilous times. Could be rough. Now, sometimes people misinterpret what I say, that I live in a state of fear and that type of thing, and I really don't. I'm concerned about where things are going, but I also know that the way things are, the way things were, are probably never coming back. I think that we've gone beyond a tipping point, and as much as I would like to have things a certain way, I just don't think they're coming back. I think we're entering a time where the church, people in the church, could be under persecution. And by the way, the persecution, this is kind of interesting. We'll talk about lockdowns in a moment, but this is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 10, "Think not that I come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household." Now that's an application to the church and the faith community, that there are going to be times coming in the future where your kids or your parents are going to disown you. And do we not see that happening all the time in culture? It's happening over political issues, but it's happening over all sorts of issues. I saw a post from a friend on Facebook. Well, I don't know if she's a friend. Maybe it was in a group that I follow, but she was asking for prayer. Her son came home, said he was getting engaged to be married. And it turns out that the person he's engaged to is really a man. And she's in great distress. What do I do? How do I act? Do I go to the wedding and everything? So we need to understand that with the way things are in the culture, that Christians are going to be faced with very, very difficult decisions in very difficult times. But I see people being, because of a particular political view, they're disowned. So last week I was accused of worshiping Trump and also saying that Trump was the Antichrist. So you can't please all the people all the time. But there is a level of the level of discourse in this country has declined to a very, very bad level. I'm glad I'm an old guy. Really, I don't know that I'd want to be 30 and trying to plan long term for the future. That would not be great. So we're going to talk about what's going on. We'll talk about the economy, virus. We'll talk about a little bit about politics. We'll talk a little bit about lockdowns. We'll talk about Middle East and some of the significant things I think are going on there. And hopefully by the end of this, I will have succeeded in offending every single person. That's my goal for today, and I'm bound and determined that that's going to happen. Listen, this is a big deal. Oil is a big deal in our economy and in the world's economy, despite the fact that people think that they can get away, that we really can get away from oil. I just don't see that happening as a practical matter. Listen, I was driving to golf the other day, and I'm going 70 miles an hour on the freeway. This is around the outer belt of Columbus. And some guy went by me, and within 25 seconds, it was over in the northwest quadrant of 270, he was over a mile ahead of me in 25 seconds. He had to be doing 150 or 60 miles an hour. And there were a lot of cars on the road. And I mean, you know it, you see it happening all the time. You're driving down the road, and all of a sudden people are blowing by you 30, 40 miles an hour faster than what you're going. It's crazy. But the other thing I always find interesting are these Tesla guys, the Tesla owners. So I saw one out in Colorado last year when I was out there to speak, and the license. I always look at license plates too, and I'll often say to Pam if we're in the car together, I said, "That's a funny license plate." She goes, "Why are you reading license plates? Just drive." And because I find them funny. So yesterday there was one, and it was similar to the one I saw in Colorado a year ago. 0 carb on a Tesla. Now wait a minute, guy. It's made out of steel, right? And there's rubber in the tires, and you use a lot of petroleum to get there. In fact, I saw a graphic of how much petroleum and energy is put into building a windmill. They weigh 165 tons. So you got all that metal. You got to transport it there in pieces. You got to have lubricants and that type. So it's not zero impact. It's not zero oil. And the Tesla people, where did the electricity come from that gives you the ability to drive around with your self-righteous license plate on? Vanity license plate. In that case, it's a vanity license, because the guy's going, "Look at me, look how good I am. I've achieved a level of human perfection that you will never achieve because I drive a Tesla." And I would love to drive a Tesla, by the way. I think they're cool looking cars and everything. But it's just, they're not going to get, so oil is going to be a big deal in our economy for some period of time to come. And here's this pandemic pressures oil company results. I talked last week about how the oil price drop and the oil price war that Saudi Arabia engendered last year last year. By the way, this is an aside. It is very difficult to judge time. Do you agree with me that it seems like time is going by very quickly? Somebody, I won't mention his name, sent me a message this morning and say, "Oh, you didn't do an update this weekend?" I'm like, the time changed. I wanted to say is the time changed last night, but it was only an hour, not a day. And it's Sunday. And he finally wrote back and said, oops, I thought it was Monday. And I was thinking about this. I watched that interview with Tucker Carlson and Tony Bobulinski about the Biden affair, which I don't have a clip of it. You can find it if you can still find it online. I think it's still there. Personally, my view as a trial lawyer, I would love to have Tony Bobulinski testifying on my side of the case. I found him to be one of the most, if not probably the most credible witness I have ever seen in my life. And I know I've offended a bunch of people already by that, but I found him to be very credible with things to back it up. But back to the oil thing. So Saudi Arabia engendered a price war. They were just pumping oil. They thought that they could drive the price of oil down, which they did, drive the price of oil down so that it would destroy the fracking industry in America, our great friends, the Saudis. And the Russians went along with it. But then what happened was it cut the revenue so much for Saudi Arabia, it put a lot of pressure on them, caused a lot of internal turmoil, and really put them in a place where they're going to have to tap their sovereign wealth fund for some period of time. And what's happened is that, the thinking was, well, the economy is going to come roaring back, everything's going to be fine, oil's going to go up, and Saudi Arabia will be on top of the world again in terms of the cash flow that we get from our easily obtained oil. It hasn't happened. I mean, as you know, the economy, the stock market, usually if it's going to be way down, it's down in October. And it went down a lot this week because people are concerned. They're concerned about the US election. They're concerned about what the effect of the lockdowns is having and the long-term effect. The stimulus that governments have been pouring into the economy is running out. And here's this. ExxonMobil posted its third consecutive quarterly loss for the first time and disclosed that it may write down the value of natural gas assets worth as much as $30 billion as the coronavirus pandemic continues to pressure the world's biggest oil companies. Chevron posted a third quarter loss. Royal Dutch Shell had a profit, but it says here, the results make clear that the pandemic continues to weigh on the industry despite a modest economic recovery and rebound in demand for oil and gas. And now we're running into more lockdowns. And again, this is what I just mentioned. Virus fears drag the markets down to the worst fall in the terms of the stock market since March. That's from the Times of London. Also in the Times of London was this: tide set to turn after house prices increase at fastest rate for 6 years. As you know, we moved this year, housing prices went up. The world economy shut down to a large extent, and housing prices went up. It didn't make any sense. And you would talk to people in real estate, and they would go, commercial real estate is cratering, but residential real estate is going up. Well, because people are working at home and not in office buildings now. It's put a lot of pressure on internet providers because there's so many people at home using bandwidth, doing Zoom calls and whatever from home. So, but in the Times of London, this report says, listen, if you think that this is going to continue, you're very naive. Things are going to start to drop with these additional lockdowns that are coming. And Boris Johnson just announced a pretty severe lockdown. This editorial cartoon, I love editorial cartoons. This is the premier, I think, of the state of whatever state that Melbourne is in. Maybe I think it's in Victoria. I'm sure my Australian friends will correct me. But they've had some really severe lockdowns. And this is, I think, is a good graphic of what's happening to big city economies in a large number of places. You have these little dictators in charge of everything that are shutting everything down. And, so here's the guy, There's a sign here in the back, closed forever, and the premier's going, hey, come on, this calls for a celebration. He's got the little Mao hat on. And it's true, this is from, again, the Times of London. Mayhem on roads as thousands flee Paris. Why? Because Paris has gone down into extreme lockdown. England's doing, or UK is doing this for like a month. This is panic buying, and city exodus is the French lockdown. Look at just some of these titles. Belgian hospitals break all records. And in some places where there's this virus is breaking out severely, there's a lot of pressure on intensive care units, just like there were earlier as they go through what appears to be a second wave of this. Spain has put itself under a 6-month state of emergency. 6 months. It's crazy. These are La Parisienne and Le Figaro from France. Talk about they're now under lockdowns and confinements. And essentially the headline says, respect everyone, just do it, just go along with it, don't fight it. This is a article that I saw in one of the Irish newspapers. This is a major highway in Ireland, and they're under a lockdown, and they're pulling people. Every car is pulled over to be checked. Why are you going where you're going? And if you don't have a good reason, you're turned around and you have to go back. So these are pretty severe lockdowns. This is a major shopping square in Milan, Italy. This is what it was like earlier. I'm going to play about a 3-minute clip of a guy who took his camera out to London. Now, we were in London 2 years ago, I'm sorry. And it's a very busy city. Traffic was horrible. The subways, the underground, the tube, whatever they call it, was crowded, shoulder to shoulder, and the subway stops. And when you try to make a transfer, and then you go to one of these giant stations where they would have trains coming through where the tube went through also, there's just thousands and thousands of people at rush hour. It's like New York City. Used to be, and now 2 years later. So this guy goes out to London. This was filmed on October 22nd or 23rd. He takes the subway into London. So just watch this a little bit. So this is the subway car. This is in the midday. And you'll see he'll come into, I think, Oxford Circle.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now approaching London Euston, where this train completes its journey. Your next and final stop, London Euston. All change, all change. Thank you.
This is in the middle of the day in one of the busy subway stations, tube stations in London. It's where you change to get different trains. You'll see here the train just pulled out, so there's not going to be any people there. But there are multiple lines of trains coming through this particular station. Now he's going to go up top to Oxford Street, the world's busiest shopping street, at lunchtime. Things I'm seeing are reports that the City of London, this separate entity, is rents have dropped 50% in commercial real estate in one of the 2 major economic centers in the world, the other being New York. This is Leicester Square. And now you're going to see he's going to show shops that are just closed. This is a movie theater, restaurants. Where is everybody? And this was taken a week and a half ago before the next big lockdown happened yesterday. This is the Royal Opera Arcade of shops. And it's not, we just closed down for a few weeks, okay? there's nothing there. They're never coming back. In New York City, it was reported that 50% of restaurants will close. That was in this morning's New York Times. And there's nobody on the buses that you see in the distance. There's just shop after shop after shop is empty. And again, this is in the middle of the day, a work day, when these things would normally be bustling. Here's 5 p.m., rush hour, in the heart of London. Restaurants. I didn't include the clip. They went to Trafalgar Square. If you've ever been to Trafalgar Square, it's just teeming with tourists and people and buses and activity. And there were a few dozen people around. Covent Garden. They're down in the, I think this is near the theater. There's one place where he goes to near the theater district, and it's just all the theaters are closed. And it's just, this is true. So Time Magazine, the international version of Time Magazine, the title of their cover article this week is The Great Reset. And we've talked about this. This is a brainchild of the World Economic Forum. They won't be holding their Davos thing, but they certainly, whether they planned this pandemic or not, is kind of irrelevant in many respects. They're certainly taking advantage of it. They want to completely change the world economy. And as this one article says in Time, the coronavirus pandemic has turbocharged geopolitical trends. We need to adapt faster. Can we agree that things are changing very rapidly in the world? And I don't think that the results of the election on Tuesday, I'll talk about that in a minute, will change anything. This is, again, that website, the strategic intelligence website that the World Economic Forum has put up, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Looking through that, I found an article that a lady had written back in 2017 on the World Economic Forum website. Okay, so they've been planning this for a while. It's pretty clear. Listen to what she says in this article. Welcome to 2030. Now that's very important. The 2030 goals, strategic sustainable development goals of the UN and everything. Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. This was from the Davos Forum in 2017. Welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city. I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense for us in this city. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, and all the things we need in our daily lives. One by one, all these things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much. First, communication became digitized and free to everyone. Then when clean energy became free, things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars anymore because we could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys within minutes. We started transporting ourselves in a much more organized and coordinated way. When I think of that, I think of like we're now been turned into robots. Shopping, I can't really remember what that is. For most of us, it has been turned into choosing things to use. Sometimes I find this fun, and sometimes I just want the algorithm to do it for me. It knows my taste better than I do now. When AI and robots took over so much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well, sleep well, and spend time with other people. This goes against so much of the way God set things up that it's beyond compare. Then she concludes with this: my biggest concern is all the people who do not live in our city, those we lost on the way, those who decided that it had become too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kind of lives outside the city. Some have torn this formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere everything I do, I think, and dream of is recorded. I just hope that nobody will use it against me. All in all, and I think there's some satire built into this article, by the way. All in all, it is a good life, much better than the path we were on, where it became so clear that we could not continue with the same model of growth. We had all these terrible things happening: lifestyle diseases, climate change, the refugee crisis, environmental degradation, completely congested cities, water pollution, air pollution, social unrest, and unemployment. We lost way too many people before we realized that we could do things differently. Wow. You mean differently like this? This is from the New York Times yesterday. A new slow killer overruns U.S. nursing homes, isolation. I know people whose parents have died alone and are dying alone. And now we have governors coming out with restrictions on how many people you can, governors and premiers and prime ministers, how many people you can have over for Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner. And with the admonition, if you see your friends violating this, call this number. If you see your neighbors violating this, they won't be your friends for long, I think, if you do call. But this is the world that we live in. And who knows what's happening? Social media. This, of course, is a continuation of the story about what Twitter is doing. They tested Twitter, Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, and the guy from Google testified virtually before Congress. This is Jack Dorsey. I watched his testimony. He lied. Ted Cruz asked him who the blank elected you. And I said, well, Pinocchio had his beard and Jack Dorsey, or Pinocchio had his nose and Jack Dorsey has his beard to determine how much he's lying. Because I think it was growing while he looked like a homeless guy up there. He's a multi-billionaire. But they were they were blocking accounts of people that were sharing these stories about Hunter Biden. And the New York Post, they finally relented the other day after about 10 days or 2 weeks that everything was done. But this is what Twitter did the other day. They got the Customs and Border Protection chief, put up a tweet about the border wall. His account was suspended. He said this: CPB continue to build new wall every day. Every mile helps us to stop gang members, murderers, sexual predators, and drugs from entering our country. It's a fact. Walls work. This is what he got from Twitter. Your account has been. He's the head of. He's a government official. And Twitter says, you violated our rules against hateful conduct. Usually they don't tell you what they did. They finally relented after a couple days and unlocked his account. Well, they unlocked the account of the New York Post. I don't know that, I think the guy from Customs and Border Patrol has had his account restored. But this is what the tech giants do. They're engaged in, I think some of the Republicans in the Senate said they're a super PAC for Democrats now because they won't let anything out there that they deem to be contrary to who they want to see elected in this election. I do not know who's going to win the election, by the way. I have my, well, there's a lot of polls that I see. I saw Rasmussen said that Trump is polling among likely black voters at 30% will vote for him. That is very unusual in our politics. Usually they say Republicans should hope to get 10% would be phenomenal. And he's polling it and it keeps going up. Because I think people don't like seeing the cities torn apart. They don't like see a guy coming at policemen with a knife. He gets shot. And he had mental problems and that type of thing. So why did his family let him get a knife? I mean, seriously. And they called the police because they knew the guy was a problem, right? And so he's 10 feet from the cops. He's coming at the cops, and they shot him, and he died. I'm sorry that happened. But if you think that 10 feet, well, it's just a knife. Your bulletproof vest will protect you. No, it's a bulletproof vest. It's not a knife-proof vest. A knife can actually get through it. I saw a video a few months ago of a guy. The cop spent like 4 minutes backing up. The guy kept coming at him with a knife. And the guy finally got about 20 feet away, and he got the cop and stabbed him. And it was his partners who had to shoot him. And he covered 20 feet is nothing. You know, I'm over 6 foot tall. If I fall down and roll a little bit, I've already got 12 feet, you know. And I'm not fast by any stretch of the imagination. But it's crazy. It's just insane. And so the guy gets shot and killed, and people looted all these stores in Philadelphia. So what did they do? They go to the Philadelphia prosecutor. He says, well, it's just looting. We're not going to prosecute them for looting. And they issued a stand-down order to not arrest people for burglary. And they consider that burglary. Now, they can deny this all the time. They said it was put out by the deputy commissioner in Philadelphia. Do you know who the commissioner of police is in Philadelphia? Used to be the commissioner of police in guess which city? No, Portland, Oregon. So they hired this person because they were doing such a great job in Portland, I guess. And they've come and they've got one of these left-wing prosecutors there who's not prosecuting, and it's just breaking down public order. Here's another. This is from the Daily Star. A lady wrote an article. Artificial intelligence makes deepfakes so perfect, even other artificial intelligence can't detect them. They're making videos so good now that make people look like they're saying or doing something, and you can't tell whether they're not, you know, the usual little Photoshop things on a dancing head. These things are really good now. And what's going to happen in the next election cycle? Look at what President Trump said, or look at what President Biden said. It'll go both ways, and you won't be able to tell. You won't be able to tell what the truth is. This is the problem. So right now, I will tell you that Fellowship Bible Chapel videos are authentic, and if you see them posted by somebody else, then take it with a grain of salt. Because believe me, if we altered video, I would not look like this. We could do better, right? Amen? Can I get an amen for not too many, not too quick. So here's this. This is a Federalist Summary, 7 open leftist threats to political terror is coming to America, whether Trump wins or not. Here's the thing about Biden. On Wednesday, the Democratic nominee told Philadelphia Gay News that President Donald Trump was given a safe harbor by protecting religious freedom and enabling what Biden condemned as discrimination. And remember, he stood here in Columbus, Ohio, a little over a year ago at the, equality group, and said, I will get HB1 enacted. That will be my first priority, and it will eviscerate any religious freedom protections. So that's why courts are important. That's why majorities in Congress and the Senate are important, because that thing has already passed the House. So if they have a Democratic House, they'll pass it again. They put it up to a Democratic Senate, and they have a Democratic president, and then you have to litigate to have your right to free expression. And so what they want to do is they want to turn the U.S. into Europe. Europe, you have the right to freedom of religion. Okay, you can believe whatever you want, just keep it to yourself and don't act on it. In America, we have freedom of expression, practice of religion. You can actually act out your faith. And so President Trump has recognized that constitutional principle and has said that you don't have to go along with certain things of these people who want to do equality and all these other things. You can act consistent with your faith. And they hate that. So it's setting up a war. So he says, Donald Trump, and this is Joe Biden, It's actually Joe Biden speaking. I guess he got loose this week. Look, I see these polls. I'm sorry. I see Obama goes and does an event, and there's 6 people there. Biden, Kamala Harris, by the way, Kamala Harris, how to pronounce it. If you say Kamala Harris, you're a racist. So go out and look. She was in Cleveland last week, and she was saying there. So everybody says it's Kamala. If you say Kamala, you're a racist. So Tucker Carlson played it the other night. Mark Stein was on. And it says, she's speaking into a microphone. She goes, yes, Cleveland is Kamala Harris country. Kamala. So is she a racist? Does she not even know her own name? This thing is so crazy. So he said, Donald Trump and Mike Pence have given hate against LGBTQ plus individuals safe harbor and rolled back critical protection for the LGBTQ plus community. By blocking the ability of transgender individuals to openly serve their country, denying LGBTQ people access to critical health care, proposing policies allowing federally funded homeless shelters to turn away transgender people, and these are just all lies. They don't let men who are pretending to be women go to women's shelters, okay? They separate kids at the border because probably a third of the children are being trafficked across the border by people that aren't even DNA matches to be their parents. So what do? You got to protect the children, right? Unless you don't care about children. I'm telling you, I've never seen, it's insane. And this is a follow-up on that NBC project last week, where they actually have the Media Manipulation Casebook is a digital research platform linking together theory, methods, and practice for mapping media manipulation and disinformation campaigns. In other words, we decide what's disinformation. We're the gatekeepers on truth. The origins of fake Antifa social media accounts. And so I see these. You see people with Antifa backpacks and stuff rioting in cities, and then people go on an interview show and they say, that's not Antifa. Those are white supremacists that are just faking everybody out. So it's crazy. Excuse me. I missed my... So now I'm going to show you, we showed you pictures of what's going on in London. This is what's happening in downtown New York, Fifth Avenue. Some of you may have been there on Fifth Avenue at, 48th Street, next to St. Patrick's Cathedral. This is what it looks like today at Saks Fifth Avenue. This is what it looks like at the Guest store on Fifth Avenue. What's going on? They're getting ready for what's going to happen on Tuesday. Because all these left-wing groups have said, we don't care if we're going to riot. There's a group that says, we're going to go remove Trump from the White House on November 4th. And I heard somebody else said, somebody said, bring it on. And secondly, you guys are idiots because he gets to be there till January 20th, even if he loses. You don't get to go take him out. But they have planned these things. And so you need to, listen, be very vigilant over the next couple of weeks. I would highly recommend that you have your car gassed up. And if you go out, every time you go out, fill your tank. Buy some extra groceries. And have a plan where you can meet up if you're in different places and you have to leave for your family. Because I don't know what's going to happen, but I do not see this not being a rough week, regardless who wins. I'd highly recommend this article at the American Spectator. Evangelical elites try to demonize votes for Trump. It's responding to an article by John Piper, who said, well, you really can't vote for Trump because he's a lousy person, but you maybe shouldn't vote for Biden because he might be a lousy person too. But they're, you see these groups, pro-life evangelicals for Biden. Don't call yourself pro-life if you support Joe Biden. You can't do it. It's not possible. You're lying. You're fooling yourself. And if you're an evangelical pastor and you're saying stuff like that, I think you would enjoy your life better if you sold insurance or something. Stop being a pastor. This is a poster in Portland. Wanted information on racist or fascist activity in your area. Contact Rose City Antifa. Phone number right there. Fight them back at riseup.net. But it's just an idea, right? Antifa is just an idea. It's not really real. I have 90 slides to go. Days from election, over 91 million votes as of this morning. People have voted already in the United States. Here's a graphic from the Washington Post this morning to show you what percentage of votes they've gotten early voting compared to what happened in 2016. Some states are low. Michigan is 5.4%. I don't understand that one. Maybe they just didn't make early voting available. Maybe that happened. Texas, they've had 108% of the votes. They've had more people vote early in Texas than they voted in the entire election. Florida is at 86%. Arizona, 87%. New Mexico, 92%. California, Nevada. I mean, so people are voting early. Washington, 94%. Oregon, 88%. Montana, 95%. And then there's Michigan at 5.4%. They're trying to suppress early voting. I think that's the only conclusion. I mean, I just can't believe that it's not that difficult. And we voted early. Okay, so this is so there's a lot of question. What's going on with the polls? Are the polls really real? You see Biden up 18 points in Pennsylvania with 6 people at his rally. He and Kamala, aka also known as Kamala Harris, went to Arizona and they had 0 people. Well, we just told them not to come. So I don't know, but here's an interview on AM Joy Reid on MSNBC. This is a pollster who's telling you about the polls. Okay, so he's supporting himself, but now I want you to think through the implications of what he says. So here's what he says.
Once we do get into those final 48 and 72 hours before Election Day, because we know people are voting en masse right now, but if we see in those final polls the type of lead that Joe Biden has now, double digits, let me just give a warning to the people of the United States. The polls are not going to be wrong. When you see that kind of a result, those are indicative, scientifically done polls of what the American electorate is suggesting they're going to do, having already voted. So it's a counterweight, if you will, to fraud. And we need to be very vigilant, all of us, about looking at all of the average of polls, particularly from those reputable pollsters in the final 24, 48, and 72 hours, because at that point, those polls become predictive of the outcome. And these are smart professional pollsters in my profession who are doing this. They could very much be a counterweight. If we have those polls with Biden up double digits, but Trump somehow wins, quote unquote, by 1 or 2 points, then something will be rotten in the state of Denmark, and we need to be very vigilant about that. Polls can help democracy in that regard.
Okay, well, here's the deal. We don't live in Denmark. Maybe you can move there with Bruce Springsteen and some of the others. By the way, people said don't fly internationally after the election so all the celebrities can get out of town. But this is a dog whistle. This is a dog whistle to all these people who want to riot on the left, that regardless of what the polls say, or regardless of what the election results say, the polls are what we really rely on. Even though the Cato Institute has a great poll out that says that, I think it's around 60% of voters say, if I support Trump, I don't answer the question when pollsters ask, because I don't want to be identified. I don't trust people. I was told by somebody in law enforcement that Antifa or Black Lives Matter have been going around putting blue tape or marks on the personal vehicles of policemen. It's happening. So, someone that I trust. This is crazy, but this is what happens with elections. So this is from the Times, some of the newspapers in Scotland. Freedom of speech protections under active consideration. This is in front of the Scottish Parliament right now. They have a hate crime bill. Now, in prior of their bills that have discrimination language and stuff like this, there is an exception in the bill that says you can do what you want in your own house. So this guy, his name is Hamza Youssef. No, it's Hamza something. And this is what he says, is listen, we want this hate crime bill to come in that will prosecute you if you say something in your own home. Why? Because if you have somebody come, well, here's what he says. These are quotes from, this is the, I think the Attorney General of equivalent Attorney General of Scotland. Conversations over the dinner table that incite hatred must be prosecuted under Scotland's hate crime law, the Justice Secretary said. Journalists and theater directors should also face the courts if their work is deemed to deliberately stoke up prejudice, Hamza Youssef said. So I guess I did get the name right. The hate crime and public order bill has been condemned by critics including the Scottish Catholic Church, police representatives, academics, and artists. It will introduce an offensive stirring up of hatred against people with protected characterizations, including disability, sexual orientation, and age. The bill is loosely based on the Public Order Act of 1986, which outlaws threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behavior, but includes a dwelling defense that states that the threatening language cannot be prosecuted if it is spoken in a private home. Mr. Youssef said that there should be no dwelling defense in his bill. He told the Scottish Parliament's Justice Committee that children, family, and house guests must be protected from hate speech. Are we comfortable giving a defense to somebody whose behavior is threatening or abusive, which is intentionally stirring up hatred against, for example, Muslims? Guess he just pulled that one out of the air. Are we saying that this is unjustified because that is the norm? If your intention was to stir up hatred against Jews, then I think that deserves criminal sanction. Well, then go prosecute Jeremy Corbyn and everybody in the Labor Party there was a member of Labor who's Jewish. Her name is Berger, Luciana Berger. She couldn't go to the Labor Party convention except with a police escort because the other members in her party wanted to get her because she's Jewish. He said this is a quote from Mr. Youssef. We wouldn't want to give the likes of Tommy Robinson a defense by saying that he's a blogger who writes for the Patriot Times, so my reasonable defense is that I am a journalist. This is an article, I'm trying to remember which newspaper I got this out of. What really lies behind the murder of Paris teacher Samuel Paty. He was murdered. Do you remember he used the cartoons of Muhammad that Charlie Hebdo had published in a class on free speech? A Muslim student got upset, posted stuff on the internet, they doxed him, and what do you know, lo and behold, the teacher is beheaded and stabbed. And now they have others. While no one is comparing the actions of First Minister Nicola Sturgeon and the Cabinet Secretary for Justice Hamza Youssef with those of Ansarov, I have a heartfelt question. So this is talking about this Scottish bill. Could you please explain to me and the Scottish people what, in essence, at the level of principle, is the difference in your attitudes between you, your cancel culture, your intolerant punishment of incorrect incantations, and the outlook of the medieval-minded butcher Abdullah Anzarov? Bravo, great editorial. That's from a Scottish paper, I believe. And so I said this. Somebody said I shouldn't say this, but I will say this. The book 1984 is a horror story about a dystopian future, not a field manual for how government is to operate. By the way, you said you can't do this in your home. Report your neighbor, report your parents if they're having too many people, if they're not sanitizing the plate of turkey between passes, or the bathroom has to be sanitized. I forget where, California, you have to sanitize the bathroom after every time somebody uses it. This is what it says, and this is a quote from 1984. The family has become, in effect, an extension of the thought police. It was a device by means of which everyone would be surrounded night and day by informers who knew him intimately. It was almost normal for people over 30 to be frightened of their own children. So look, with this and social credit scores, I will give Newsweek credit. They're trying to strike a balance. Their cover article of their new magazine is Xi's secret plan to subvert America. Article here on the left from the Times of London. German spy chief said China is poised to dominate the world. And there's a lot of concern among intelligence officials that China is doing this. In the article in the Times, it said this: China is close to world domination and Europe must wake up to the danger. A former head of Germany's foreign intelligence agency has told the Times. Gerhard Schindler, who led the Federal Intelligence Service, BND, from 2011 to 2016, said that Germany needed to curb its strategic dependence on Beijing and ban Huawei from its 5G mobile phone network. He also warned that Angela Merkel's liberal approach to the 2015 migrant crisis had left Germany with a large reservoir of young Muslim men susceptible to violence and jihadist ideology, and that the true scale of the danger was only now becoming clear. And he has a new book that he wrote that's called, well, the English translation is Who's Afraid of the BND? That's the intelligence agency that he headed up. He argues in that book that Germany has hobbled its spy agencies with unnecessary red tape and neglected some of the most serious threats to its security. And no, he was writing about Germany, not the United States, although he probably could have wrote the same thing about this. And people are afraid to talk about Germany because they're doing all sorts of things with people, getting them involved with women or men and taking photographs, and then they blackmail them. This is the concern with what we've heard over the last week from Tony Bobulinski and the Bidens. And I have one more story that I want to, so this is the title, The New China Syndrome. In fact, there's a thing in here that says that this came from Mike Pompeo. Well, they rated governors based on how friendly they were, the U.S. governors on how friendly they were to China, and found that 17 of them were very friendly. This article was at American Greatness. Is China funding the phony Joe Biden campaign? Have you heard about this? This is what she said. I think I posted this article. Act Blue has raised, this is for Act Blue for the Democrats, has raised $3.5 billion in the last 10 months. Act Blue's $3.5 billion is on top of the Democrats' big donors. It does not include the $500 million or more from Democrats' 50 billionaire backers. It doesn't count Soros' $250 million Open Society Foundation 2020 budget. It doesn't include Mark Zuckerberg's legally questionable privatization of our election process by spending $400 million for unmonitored ballot boxes in Democratic state districts, which is an invitation to illegal ballot harvesting. Do you understand, Zuckerberg? $400 million. Democrats boast that most of their money, now, okay, so let's do the credibility meter, okay? So this will be total nonsense, this will be truth, okay? Democrats boast that most of the money comes in small donations from unemployed people, $3.5 billion, small donations from unemployed people. Yeah. The Democratic National Committee claims 40% of its donors are unemployed. The Biden campaign claims 51% of its donors are unemployed. Trump campaign, 3% unemployed. ActBlue has leveraged its powerhouse presence to negotiate a special relationship with banks so it does not have to reveal donor names when processing its gift cards, as is normally required for virtually all online transactions. Some people have long suspected this allows ActBlue or mega donor to easily break large donations down into smaller gifts to avoid campaign finance laws and Federal Election Commission scrutiny. And you know what? I believe every single word of that article. Because if you will remember, I talked about this back during the Obama administration. What they were doing was that Obama DOJ was suing big banks and stuff over financial improprieties and whatnot, and they were getting these multi-billion-dollar settlements, which were then funneled not to the government, not to the people who were wrong, but to these entities, and they got billions of dollars. So listen, I don't have any proof of it. Okay, but somebody who lives a few blocks from the White House, he had a thing called Organizing for America, and he funneled all this money to all these left-wing organizations while he was there. And then on his way out the door, he took people from political appointments and put them into protected jobs in the government civil service. And did you see, was it Tammy, what's her name? She's blonde, Tammy. Anyway, she did a thing, and she showed the Zoom call where all these employees of the government were saying, we're funneling things to the media from the government through Signal, an app called Signal. So that's the first 10% of what I wanted to talk about today. I'll try to... you need to have a circle of friends around you that you can call if you're in trouble. And you need to be situationally aware of what's going on. I told you what's happening to law. So, do you think these law enforcement vehicles are being marked because they want to know who they can go over and offer a free car wash to? Do I see any hands out there? I don't. So look, again, I don't lay awake at night worrying about it, but I'm also aware of what's going on. If you don't have to go downtown in big cities to work this week, I would not do it. Not because you're afraid, it's because you're smart. Avoid big crowds. Don't go to the mall. Amazon is great. I ordered something yesterday afternoon. It'll be at my house when I get home from church today. Crazy. And it's like it's like, who orders something like this? And it's there. They have it in stock. It's insane. And it's also very convenient. By the way, I remember all this stuff. Dinesh D'Souza directed contributions in the last campaign of $20,000 and went to prison. This is criminal. And I have no explanation why people aren't being prosecuted. Okay? I cannot explain it. Somebody suggested that the DOJ is corrupt, the FBI is corrupt, and I'm not going to argue with you. This is a great article in the Jerusalem Post this morning. So let's look at the Middle East. I can do this maybe if I can have 15 minutes. So here's I have the article here. Turkey's unfinished war on the West, with the West. This is an interesting article written by Simon Schofield in the Jerusalem Post and this morning's Jerusalem Post. And he talks about this, and I'll use this graphic while I'm looking at this article. This is this was a Twitter transmission of a Turkish flag, of what you see all the places they don't have that they want to get right away. Parts of Greece, Bulgaria, Syria, Iraq, and we talked about this over the last 5 years. The Treaty of Severus, this was 1923, was a crushing humiliation for the Ottomans, proposing to dismember the Sultan's empire, leaving a rump state in which the Turkish people could lick their wounds. In defeat, they rallied around Field Marshal Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the only Ottoman military commander to be undefeated in World War I. Ataturk had masterminded the Turkish defense of Gallipoli, a pivotal victory which has shaped Turkey's identity as much as Trafalgar has shaped Britain's. The triumph of an audacious Turkish nation over the Western powers that had caused the Ottoman fall from grace is a tale deeply embedded in Turkey's political culture. However, there have always been voices throughout Turkey's modern history who have voiced dissatisfaction with the events of a century ago, believing Ataturk did not push far enough in the Treaty of Lausanne. Such sentiments were voiced by none other than Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who demanded that the treaty be renegotiated when he visited Athens in December 2017, the first such visit to Greece by a Turkish head of state in 65 years. At the time, Erdogan's chief aide, dubbed Erdogan's secret keeper, said he is of the opinion that the treaty has expired, according to a wiretap telephone conversation submitted to a Turkish court. And so this is what you see Erdogan doing. He is doing this nationalism. The article goes on to consider the echoes of Severus and Lausanne. These are these treaties from 1920, 1923, continue to reverberate throughout the corridors of power in Ankara, believing that the fall of the Ottoman Empire was due to its inability to secure naval supremacy in, guess where? The Eastern Mediterranean. Where have we seen Erdogan moving, trying to get, through these agreements, control of what? The Eastern Mediterranean. So these people take long-term views of things. Erdogan's not really worried about the next election cycle right now. He's worried about what happens in 100 years. And I saw an article this week, I don't have it in my presentation today, where they have studied the demographics of Europe. Now, they always project out 100 or 200 years. And then whenever I say, look, they say in 200 years, every country in Europe, with a few exceptions, like maybe Bulgaria and Poland, will be 50% Muslim in 200 years. Now, so everybody, I get all these emails that say, oh, so you don't think the Lord's returning for 200 years? Well, one, I don't know the day or the hour, and you don't either. And I'm just telling you that I think that whatever they're projecting out 200 years will be accelerated very rapidly. And so the numbers are probably already higher. France is probably over 10% already, even though their official statistics won't show that. And once they reach that 10% level, that's a tipping point. So Erdogan wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, and he is pushing it. And so this article in the Jerusalem Post, highly recommend that you read it. Title, Turkey's Unfinished War with the West. It will explain a lot. He concludes with this: there is a toxic political cocktail being pervaded and supped in Ankara. Its ingredients include hardline political Islamism, Turkish ethno-nationalism, irredentist dreams of restoring Ottoman territory, and a bunker mentality belief of Western conspiracies against Turkey. The only possible outcome is that tensions will continue to escalate as Erdogan steers his country away from Western liberal democracies like NATO and toward the managed democracies club led by Russia and China. Great freedom lovers there in those companies. So Erdogan has been a busy guy over the last week. I sat down, I had I talk an hour, today I'll talk 2.5 hours roughly. And I'll go home, I'm tired, okay? And I see these guys out on the campaign trail, you know who I'm talking about, doing 5 or 6 one-hour speeches all over the country in one day and then doing it the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. I don't have that kind of energy or stamina. And Erdogan, he's doing speeches like this a couple times a day, every day, it seems like. So this is what he said in one speech this way. France recalls Turkey envoy after Erdogan says Macron needs a mental check. Because what did Macron say? We need to change Islam. We need to put in a French version, get rid of political Islam, which it's interesting. If I said political Islam, I would mean you're a hater, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you're an Islamophobe. Macron can say it. And did the New York Times issue an editorial? Did the Washington Post issue it? Look at that bigot, Emmanuel Macron. And it is political Islam. Go look at Bill Warner's website, who talks about Islamic Jihad. So he said, because Macron said we got to get rid of political Islam and do a French version, Erdogan comes right out and says, Macron, you're mental. You need to have a mental check. If the European countries, he said in his speech, want to preserve their positions in the global system, which is being restructured, they must at once tackle the affliction of Islamophobia in their systems. That's a speech by Erdogan this week. Another study came out, sort of off topic, 60%, Europe lost 60% of its Jewish population in the past half century. And then some other speeches that Macron gave, or that Erdogan gave. Well, here's this. Erdogan declares war on the Arabs. An article by Khalid Abu Tomeh at the Gatestone Institute, talking about that Erdogan's saying these things in parliament. He said, some countries in our region did not exist yesterday, and they may not exist in the future. I think I played the clip of that last week where he said that. And so he's essentially saying, listen, you Arab countries, you didn't exist a century ago. We did, you didn't, and we're going to take over. And so part of what he's doing is he's pushing for these exclusive economic zones that block people from sending gas from here to Greece to Europe. He wants it to go this way so he can get transit fees. He wants to control it. Lebanon and Israel are having talks about the border. I'm trying to remember when this article, I think this article came out this week. It's in the Financial Times. The rivalries pitting MBZs, the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates, against Erdogan. There's a lot of tension there. And Erdogan does not like that Israel has made peace, entered into normalization agreements with these other Arab countries. And he's against it. And he also thinks that, like they did under the Ottoman Empire, the Ottomans, the Turks under Erdogan, should be controlling Mecca and Medina. Here's another speech that he gave this week. It says this: if European countries want to preserve their positions, okay, they need to get rid of Islamophobia. That was the one speech that I told you about. He also said this in another speech this week: with the permission of Allah and the support of our nation, they will not be able to stop this blessed march, no matter what they do. As the sun of righteousness and justice rises, the fire of cruelty will die and the power of the oppressor will be exhausted. It sounds like he has an agenda, right? He wants to control it. He also said this in yet another speech this week, last Monday. The rising Islamophobia in the West has turned into an all-out attack on our book, our prophet, and all our sacred values. And so what he did was he did another speech where he actually proposed a Turkmen army. Now, what would the Turkmen army include? And they actually have, and this is the Turkish Gazette newspaper. You see this, Kare, Turan, or Dusu. They want an army of Turkmen. Where do these people live? I've talked about this. I know I talked about this in the late 1990s. Remember I called it the Stan republics. Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and all those other stands. And a lot of them are Turkish ethnic origin, and he wants to unite that army. And what does he really want to do with that army ultimately? Jerusalem, Al-Quds, the Temple Mount. That's what he wants. Here's yet another speech from Erdogan. It is our honor to stand sincerely against the attacks on our prophet, who gave honor to Mecca, Medina, Asia, Africa, Europe, the whole world, all worlds and all times. Turkey had a big earthquake this week. There was at least 37 dead as of this morning. It actually, in Izmir, which is in the area of the 7 churches of Revelation, caused a small tidal wave. And you see this, the things going down the street of Izmir in Turkey. And they've had a sort of a swarm. This is from understandingwar.org. These are the areas in the world where Russia and Turkey are currently at odds. Seems like there's a lot of disagreement going on. How's this all going to work out? Look, I have no doubt Turkey is a major player in the end times. Okay, I think Russia is, but I'm not sure. But I've often said Russia has a Muslim problem. They're way above 25% Islamic in Russia, in their army. And if Putin wants to stay in power, he's going to have to appease them some way. What would appease them? Hey, listen, all you other Islamic countries, you leave us alone, but we'll help you get Jerusalem. Do you think that's possible? Geopolitically, absolutely it's possible. Here is 2 Islamic terrorist attacks strained French relations with Muslims. 100 million Muslims protested. So a Muslim guy slits the throat of a guy in Paris, a teacher, and 100 million Muslims protest because Emmanuel Macron is Islamophobic. And this is the picture they use. You see the picture? The boot on the face? This is an Islamic insult. And then this is another thing that I heard about the attacks, 3 dead, 1 beheaded in a church in Nice, in Notre Dame Cathedral in Nice, France. And I think it happened Thursday. On Friday, I'm kind of compiling these things. I'm like, did that happen a week ago? Or did that happen yesterday? Because it seemed like so much time had gone by because so many things had happened. So here is 3 dead in church. This is an article from, I think, the Jerusalem Post. 3 dead in church attack, plunging France into a dual emergency because they've locked everything down. And look at the picture there. The boot on Macron's face. This is an insult from Islam. And a French-Israeli member of parliament said France must outlaw political Islam. And people are upset, boycott French products. Here is an imam who's speaking about it. And the Associated Press comes out and says, they don't just say that there's this dispute, right? They come out like, well, we'll tell you why the Muslims are upset. We think these are the reasons that they have to be upset. They're a news organization, not an apologist for Islam. Here's an imam in Toronto talking about what he thinks should happen, what happened in Paris with the teacher who got killed.
Not too long ago, a teacher in France chose to show those insulting cartoons to his class at a school. And of course, some of the Muslim students who were there were very annoyed and upset, and they objected, as did their parents. And they spoke up, but nobody bothered listening to them. Nobody paid any attention to them.
This is Toronto.
Then about a week ago, it is said, and I repeat, it is said, that a young Muslim man confronted this cursed individual. He confronted this evil-spirited man. He confronted this filthy excuse of a human being on the street, and he beheaded him. It is said this is what happened. And then, just a few days ago, instead of addressing the issue in a manner that is befitting, what do the French decide? They decide now to display these filthy images on government buildings. Right now, we are angry at what these...
Do you understand how sick and twisted this is? This religion? Can we just be blunt? Twisted, filthy. Your religion beheaded. And you see what he says? It is said that they beheaded him. Because you can see other imams who are going into mosque and saying, this was done by the French secret police and they're blaming it on Islam to stoke up anti-Muslim fervor. So it's sort of like, so we got this in the US, we got this in France, we got this here, we got Erdogan. The world's a little bit on a knife, instead of Event Horizon, I should have called it on a knife's edge maybe. That's where we're living. So France is having a showdown with the Islamic world. This is an article from the Begin Sadat Center titled France's Showdown with the Islamic World by Colonel Dr. Raphael G. Buchnik Chen. You can find that at the Begin Sadat Center website. I would recommend. The beheading of school teacher, which occurred 2 weeks ago, after a momentous speech by President Macron in which he unveiled plans to defend French secular values against Islamic radicalism, marked the start of what might turn out to be an all-out war between France and the Islamic world, with Turkey's Erdogan leading the Muslim charge by taking a stand against Muslim extremism, violence, and suppression of freedom of speech. Macron might find himself facing a new wave of Islamic terror. This is from the front page of the Arab News, talking about that Arabs agree with, there's a poll that they did in Saudi Arabia, or throughout the Arab world, that Arabs are pretty much with Trump on Iran, but they didn't really like him moving the embassy to Jerusalem. And you can find that in the Arab News on, I think it was either Monday or Tuesday last week. Here's just a brief interview, though, to show the shift in the view of the United Arab Emirates. This is an interview at I-24 News. You can find almost all their videos on YouTube, interviewing a representative of the United Arab Emirates about the Palestinian issue. This is an interesting interview. Look at what he says.
Do you think that now, after the peace agreement was signed between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, we might see the UAE entering that spot, maybe trying to become some sort of a mediator itself?
UAE is committed to the cause, to the Palestinian people, not to the, let's say, the Palestinian leader. Both of them, Hamas and the authority, both of them are corrupt. Both of them are murderers. So now the anger which is on UAE from both of them, because UAE stopped paying anything. We want to pay, we will pay the people, not both of you. About Abbas, Abbas is what? He's what we call in Arabic, Taj al-Shanta, which is, let's say, which is a common trader, which is on his back. He's running here and there. He came here and he brought his son, and his son was disputing a card. I am an agent for this one. I am an agent for this company. Now you came to help the Palestinian, or you came to sell yourself or your companies? So we know all the tricks.
So just so you're not confused, he's talking about Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen's son, came to the UAE to try to sell the influence that he had with his father, Mahmoud Abbas. Okay, so he's talking about Abbas, not Hunter and Joe Biden. Okay, I just thought you might get your wires crossed on that a little bit.
They do. So I think now UAE had enough, Saudi Arabia had enough, but every time they miss the chance by refusing to negotiate, and they lose more, and they lose more, and they lose more. Now I think it's time for them to sit and negotiate.
So, interesting perspective. Things have really changed. Here's an article from Jerusalem Post. Palestinians condemn the Shafel-Israel-Sudan Accord. Of course they would condemn it. This is an interesting comment from Kajil today. The Zaki Al-Mayadeen said this. He was the former, he's head of the opposition party. They've had a revolution in Sudan. And he's not really on board with this. He's one of the Islamists. And he came out, so everybody says, well, Sudan made peace with Israel. Okay, so Ezekiel 38 is not going to happen for a while. Okay? Because, Sudan's part of Ezekiel 38 coalition that invades Israel. Now, personally, I think the whole thing advances the clock on the end times. Because Sudan, like other Islamic people, will make peace when they are weak. And then when they think they're strong, what will they do? They will break the peace. It's called a hudna. And so be careful with all of these peace and normalization agreements. I hope they work. It'd be great. But also understand that the Arab states are in a bit of a state of concern about the power of Iran and Turkey, even though Turkey and Iran are having horrible economic problems. So they're entering into these normalization agreements with Israel, who they view as an ally for now. But I don't know if they're strong in their religion that they will continue to hold that. I would not expect that to happen. I forgot to put this in. This is from the New York. When we're talking about lockdowns, this is the MTA plans to slash costs. The subway system in New York City could erase 450,000 jobs. Why? Because nobody's taking the subway. Manhattan is a ghost town in many places. It's crazy. So anyway, so back to this guy. This is the article. Head of Sudan's largest party slams Trump and the Israeli deal. Remember that Sudan was always against Israel. I showed you front pages from the Jerusalem Post in 2008 and 2011 or 12, talking about showing that Israel had attacked convoys and that type of thing in Sudan. They would get weapons from Iran. They would then convoy them up to Hamas for attacks on Israel and that type of thing, and Israel took them out. But after the 67 war, the Six-Day War in 1967, the Arab League had a meeting, and these are pictures from that meeting, in Khartoum, Sudan. And after that meeting, they issued this thing called the Khartoum Resolution. And what was become known from that are the three no's of the Khartoum Resolution. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiations with it, and insistence on the rights of the Palestinian people in their own countries. Well, Trump talked about Ethiopia and Egypt. Did I mention this last week? When he was doing the peace thing with Sudan and Israel on the phone call, he talked about what was going on between Ethiopia and Egypt over this dam. And I'll just, I think this is classic Trump. He just sort of, I'm not sure how to say this without people saying, oh, you're a Trump worshiper or you think he's the Antichrist. He doesn't seem to have the same filters that a lot of people do. Like, I should probably maybe shouldn't say that. I'm just going to, he's sort of like, I'm just throwing it out there. And so this is what he said about the Egypt-Ethiopia thing.
I ask you, how is the dam doing in Ethiopia, the largest dam in many, many years being built. Unfortunately, it stops water from flowing into the Nile, which causes Egypt a little bit of a problem, right, as it should. But Ethiopia built a dam. You know all about it probably, Bibi, but I've been dealing with Sudan on that. And I'm just curious, how is that going? Because you're really the third party involved with Ethiopia and Egypt and the dam. Are they working out their deal? Because I had a deal done for them. And then unfortunately, Ethiopia broke the deal, which they should not have done. That was a big mistake. And we've stopped payment to them of a lot of aid. They got to get it done. And I'm telling Egypt the same thing, by the way, you know, because they could have stopped it. They should have stopped it long before it was started. I said, how do you let it get built? And then you say they have a dam, you know, but they had other things on their mind. That was at a time when they were having a minor revolution, to put it mildly. That was a bad time for Egypt, so I guess
Egypt was having the Muslim Brotherhood revolution that was stoked by Obama and that type of thing, and they really didn't do anything about stopping Ethiopia from starting the dam, which has been under construction for 5 or 6 years. It's cost billions of dollars, and President Trump was sort of like, I don't know why you let you build that thing anyway. You know, why'd you let that happen? And in Ethiopia, you broke the deal. You made a deal with me, and that's bad. You didn't do what you're not going to get the money. But he also said, you know, Ethiopia may go blow the thing up, and who could blame him? You know, because it's a big deal for Egypt, because they don't have the water, and and so Ethiopia is saying, hey, you're inciting war, President Trump. Don't do that. Now, the other thing I would say is, hey, Egypt, you have a big dam there called Aswan and a big Lake Nasser behind it. Why don't you let some of the water out of your dam and take care of part of the problem? Why do you get the dam up the Nile and Ethiopia doesn't? And so we have, like we have in Turkey and now in the Middle East, we have all these dam problems, as they say. DAM. U.S. citizens born in Jerusalem now can put Jerusalem, Israel, as their birthplace, Pompeo announced the other day. And then here's President Trump. He's talking about, are there going to be more peace deals? Here's what he says.
Expect any other countries to join your
Yeah. We have, you mean to join the 3 countries? Yeah. Yeah, I do. We have 5, but we really have probably 9 or 10 that are right in the mix. We're going to have a lot. I think we'll have all of them eventually.
Before the election or after the election?
Well, it'll be largely after. We're doing a lot of work right now, and I'm involved in all of those deals. The beauty is it's peace in the Middle East with no money and with no blood. There's no blood all over the sand, and it's happening. No, we have 5 definites, and I think we'll have another 5 pretty much definites too. And all of them, the big ones, the smaller ones, and the 3 that we got, really I have great respect. UAE, Mohammed is a very highly respected warrior. He's a warrior. And then Bahrain, likewise, and Sudan, that was a great get, because as you know, there's been tremendous hostility with Israel. So yeah, we're very excited about it, and we did it a much different way than they've been working over the last 30 years, but we're very excited about it.
Okay, let me just, 2 things real quick, I promise. There's a Zoom meeting, Palestinian Authority, the day after Mahmoud Abbas. It has some great people in it, Caroline Glick and Dr. Mordecai Kadar. That starts, I believe, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time today. So in a couple minutes after I finish. So that you can get it at that thing on Facebook. That's the name of the group, and then that's, I believe, the Zoom address that you can click on at 1 o'clock and join in. I'm sure it'll be archived someplace. Again, there are negotiations over this disputed area with Lebanon. And then I would highly recommend this. There was a good little blurb on Friday at Israel Channel 7, which is actually run by Christians. They do like a couple 30-minute shows each week about geopolitical issues involving Israel and the Middle East. And they did a great one on the Eastern Med the other day. I would highly recommend that you look at it. But Friday they had a news report that said, listen, Syria Iran is still trying to help people in Syria. And so there is this article, this came from the jcpa.org, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Brigadier General retired Dr. Shimon Shapira. It's excellent, it's about 44 page, you can go and download it, just go to jcpa.org and you can see it. It's a 44 page PDF, and it shows that it talks about how Iran views itself, Syria and Lebanon are really parts of Iran through Hezbollah. And you see here, you see the cover that they used, the graphic that they used. I think it's very interesting. It's Nasrallah, and he is tearing apart the Lebanon flag and knitting it into the Iranian flag. Very interesting. And they also have things like, here are the generals. It talks about how Soleimani came and they had a real strong spiritual bonding between Soleimani and Nasrallah before he was killed. And of course, we know that Hezbollah has put up these things like Soleimani overlooking the border. And that's a poster that they use of Soleimani being welcomed to heaven by the Imam Ali, the Imam that the Sunnis, the Shiites consider very important. He's hugging Soleimani. You see Khomeini there, and the other people are different Hezbollah and other terrorist people that have been assassinated and killed over the years. So he just says this, just a couple quotes. The struggle between Hezbollah and Israel is at full throttle. Hezbollah, with Iran's help, is working to build long-range capabilities that will allow it to strike precise targets in the Israeli home front. Israel has resolved to prevent Hezbollah from gaining that capability, even though both sides want to avoid where the conflict between them could spin out of control if one side makes a miscalculation. And it says that Hezbollah has plans to seize lands in the Galilee. This is a change in plans. This is kind of a big deal. So I would highly recommend that you go and read it. It's a very fascinating history of Hezbollah-Iran relationship, the development and growth, and the starting of Hezbollah and the spinning off as Islamic Jihad. Israel's having big military maneuvers in the north because they think this could be a war. We know that prophetically, eventually there will be a war up there, but in the midst of all this peace and war and turmoil, so listen, go home, be situationally aware. God is in control, but you also have a duty, I think, to take care of yourself. So watch, just keep your eyes peeled for what's going on, and let your friends know if something's happening in your area or areas that should be avoided. Communicate with people. You have about 1 million ways to communicate. So we'll try to monitor the thing, see what happens. I will be on Stand Up for the Truth at Q90 FM in Green Bay, Wisconsin this week with David Fiorazzo. I think that will be Thursday the 5th at 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central. Okay? Enough? There are 20 minutes. Over. Anyway, so let's pray. Father, we pray that you will keep us safe this week. Give us wisdom, knowledge how to act, and pray that we will be willing to help our neighbors as needs arise. Pray that you will, if possible, that you'll just intervene and keep everything peaceful. But Lord, all things that we do, help us to remember that what we should do should be to honor and glorify you and your Son, Jesus Christ, through all that we do. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.